Welcome back to Caregiving Sweet Tea. Today we're going to discuss caregiving, but we're going to talk about the conversations and having the hard conversations about maintaining independence for our loved one at home and dealing with all the things that may affect their care in the future. Nearly 80% of older adults say they want to age independently in their home versus moving to a different setting like an assisted living and/or nursing home. The home is the best place for them to age healthy and independently. There are some actual dangers when we're approaching that conversation of caregiving with our loved one. We don't want to infantize it and treat them like a child. So we want to have a respectful, compassionate conversation about the next steps. One thing that you don't want to happen is for your loved one to self-isolate. If they feel like you're controlling the conversation or not giving them the opportunity to share their own opinion and wishes, they may completely self-isolate, which then would lead to depression, and just other issues of them not being open to the conversation. So let's have this conversation with a delicate approach and compassion to have an open conversation where they're included in each step going forward. When your loved one, for example, is self-isolating or having signs of depression, we want to avoid that because that can lead to cognitive decline and other issues for their health. Some key tips that we suggest is just have an ask versus telling someone. Give a suggestion. Another opportunity is to offer choices. Give them different options that they can choose versus making the decision for them. For example, knocking on the door before you walk in and just respecting their boundaries would overall have this conversation move smoothly. Finding balance as a caregiver can be very difficult. How can I have this conversation without overstepping? When a caregiver is starting this conversation, sometimes it's so difficult but so important. One of the key things we have to discuss is safety concerns. When you have a loved one that is at home and cooking and you fear that they may not remember to turn off the stove, that is a major safety concern. If you have a loved one that you fear is not going to be responsible while driving, another major concern. Having these conversations early can avoid the opportunity of accidents, fires, and just safety hazards that can happen in time if we're not careful. A key factor that we can discuss is just focusing on the partnership with your loved one versus control. When you have a loved one that has any of these symptoms of possibly leaving the stove on, possibly driving and you don't feel like they're safe on the roads, or maybe not even locking their door or remembering to locking their door. These are major concerns. And so when you have a loved one that is on the edge of probably not remembering these key safety items, having the conversation early, having the smart technology in the home that can be that extra assistance, as well as maybe possibly having a caregiver come in to help to ensure that these safety things aren't an issue. How do you have the conversation with your loved one that it's time for more care? When having a loved one age, it's important to know when is the time for the home setting not being safe. As we discussed, if you're in fear that safety is an issue, it may be best to move your loved one to an assisted living setting where we don't have to worry about the stove, the driving, that they're in a safe setting 24/7. One of the key strategies is having neutral allies. For example, the physician, your financial advisor, or your attorney. These allies can help assist while having the conversation of saying, we need to move. You want to frame these conversations as support and not loss. I think one of the key things that we do with a lot of families is really discuss the benefits of why this is beneficial. For example, Many loved ones that are living in their home may be extrovert, but not able to have the opportunity to be around others. Being in an assisted living gives them the opportunity to go to events, have neighbors, have similar people that they can talk to of their decade, of their time, to have an opportunity to do a safe guided activity in the community kitchen, have a safe guided activity where they can play cards. These environments are safe and will help them age longer, and the number one benefit is that they're getting social interaction. Having that social interaction with a group of similar-minded people will not only help them age, but also help their health as they age. For the listeners, for those actually being cared for, it's important to know the tips and strategies, how to speak up for yourself in the situation that you have a loved one that really cares for you and you want to be able to voice your opinion and your needs. The first tip is to express your preferences clearly and as often as possible. Second tip is to be an advocate for the needs that you want. For example, your hobbies and specific things that will help you to age gracefully in home and or making the transition to an assisted living. Making sure you have your wants and your needs met at that time. The third tip is to know it's okay to set boundaries and having limits to what your daughter or son may be saying and say, no, I'm not okay with this, but I'm okay with this. I think that will give good option for you to be an advocate for yourself as you're transitioning into the next phase of life. A sense of autonomy is strongly linked to better health outcomes and satisfaction in older adults. I wanted to share a personal story of my stepfather. When he was passing of cancer, I noticed that even as a caregiving expert, I was probably being too forceful. I had set up the caregiving agency in their local area. I had set the times. I had set the schedule. I wasn't even listening to my own tips. So one of the things that I suggest is you have to be open about this conversation. When I realized that I was being too forceful in setting what I knew best was going to be for his better health, I had not given him the control and the opportunity for him to be involved in his care. When I stepped back and said, okay, how do you want this to look? Is it okay that we have a caregiving? He actually shut me down and said, no, I don't want any caregiving. But he did allow me the opportunity to have the agency to come and sign up and have all the paperwork set in place. So in the event he did need care, which did happen from time to time, everything was in place. So meet your parent where they are versus forcing them where to go. I noticed when I did force him or was saying this needed to happen and this needs to happen today, he really shut down and really didn't want to talk to me anymore. He was definitely pressing ignore on his phone. So to avoid that from happening, I suggest really having an open conversation of where they're willing to go and then meet them there and slowly take each step so you don't have a complete shutdown or self-isolation of your loved one. Having tough conversations can be very difficult, but if you frame it around safety and health issues, it can make the conversation easier and more tangible for your loved one to process. For our final episode, we're going to discuss something that we haven't been talking about. We've talked about the tough conversations and how hard and how difficult and going through these hard times. And sometimes the best thing we can do is find the joy in those times. So our final episode, we'll take a deeper dive in how to find joy during stress and hard conversations, especially when you're dealing with caregiving. I encourage listeners to share this episode and share your own comments about how you've been caregiving about your loved one. Any tip and any extra will help not only for you, but also for another person that may be going through the same story.